irrational behavior exhibited by a person holding a high position in society. In order to include an idea into our thinking as a belief, the way forward, he stated, was to conduct a deep probe with explicit questions on the subject. Socrates was insistent on setting aside those ideas that did not give a rational explanation, though they were very helpful to people's interests or served to comfort people looking for a way forward. People possessed an undesirable egocentric quality, which made them make the wrong choices. While analyzing, he traced out complete implications of the expressed idea and the actions accompanying them. Socratic questioning thereby becomes the basis for the critical thinking agenda. One needed to study fundamental concepts, step by step, taking into account the assumptions used and how the idea took shape and its basis, too. Through Socratic questioning, we understand the need for logical consistency in order to arrive at clarity. Next in the historical path of critical thinking came his successors Plato and Aristotle. All these Greek skeptics underlined the fact that everything differed from their external manifestation. Incidentally, Plato kept records of the sayings of Socrates, which is why we know so much about it. Greek tradition thus helped set up the foundation for seeking the way of thinking that was comprehensive yet responsive to arguments and helped systematic thinking. One could then see deeper realities and not be deluded by superficial impressions. People needed to think deeper and not be swayed by first impressions. Systematic critical thinking. The practice of critical thinking carried on through the Dark Ages due to the works and teachings of eminent writers and philosophers. Prominent among them was Saint Thomas Aquinas. His work Summa Theologica had a profound influence on Western literature and philosophy. Following the trend of critical thinking, this work put forward the teachings of the Church, explaining in detail every point in Christian theology. It follows a circle of purpose of man, namely Christ. It then goes on to the next, which are the sacraments. From there it reaches God. So, this existence of God explains the creation of man. The laymen of those days, and even today, follow the 5 ways prescribed in the book. This put forward the arguments and proves the existence of God. However, compared to the rest of his work, this part takes up only 5 pages. The book in all has 3,500 pages. There are many references to people in society having respect during the days of Aquinas. At the top of the page, we have Aristotle, the philosopher. People investigated into theological practices and notions with a precise system of logic that he was famous for. The philosopher defined many technicalities that served to help with the analysis. Alongside the works of Aristotle were publications of the commentaries given by Ibn Rushd on the philosophers. Ibn Rushd became famous as the commentator. Aristotle often writes about Ibn Rushd as Avicenna in his works. Remember that your brain is unique and it is more complex than any computer out there. It is an amazing organ, perhaps one of the most amazing in our bodies, and you need to take care of it and protect it from losing its elasticity and becoming complacent. So be sure to exercise your brain using the methods presented here and begin to think logically. It's going to be hard at first, but you're going to be able to do it if you stick with it. Thank you for listening and good luck in improving your brain power. Other people mentioned in the Summa are Peter Lombard the Master, Rabbi Moses, Augustine of Hippo the theologian, and Dionysius thought of as the disciple of St. Paul. The teaching of Aristotle showed that critical thinkers are not blindly opposed to established faith. They only discarded beliefs that lacked a proper foundation. Sir Francis Bacon and the advancement of learning. Sir Francis Bacon lived in England during this period. His book, The Advancement of Learning, encouraged readers to make empirical studies of the world. While seeking knowledge, people misuse their brains. He understood the need for using processes for information gathering, search Google, that today forms the foundation for science. Left to their own devices, people show the tendency to become bad. They accumulate bad habits. Their thoughts become corrupt and lead them away from reality. He terms these thoughts as idols, and it forms the central object for his explanation of various deviations in thinking. Idols of tribe. You see instances where your mind betrays your beliefs. Idols of school. Person develops unscientific thinking methods if the instruction is poor or they have to follow blind rules. Idols of marketplace. This is a reference to our own misuse of words just because it is convenient. Idols of theater. This occurs when people begin to act without thinking because of custom. People consider the book very modern because it conveys ideas that we use today. This book, which explains that the mind cannot exist without support from other people in society, is the forerunner to all texts on critical thinking. Descartes' principle of systematic doubt. 5 decades later in France, we see the rise of another philosopher named Descartes. His main contention was for clarity with accuracy. People recognize his famous saying, "I think, therefore I am." He spoke about it, he argued for it. Scientifically sound, he had good mathematical abilities. His work in physics might be familiar to many, refraction. He is known for his book, Meditations on First Philosophy. He explains that one can only be certain about one's own existence. His work established the epistemological trend that has lasted for 300 years. The mind needed systematic disciplining to be able to think clearly and perfectly. His book, Rules for the Direction of the Mind, is. This critical thinking method is based on the principle of systematic doubt. He wanted testing and questioning for all parts of thinking. As opposed to ordinary thinking that assumed everything and questioned nothing, Descartes tended to keep inquiring into one's beliefs with a wall of doubt. Beliefs derived from the senses, usually deceived. Looking at a stick in the water, a person might be led to assume that the stick is bent. This was an optical illusion. For Descartes, the ability to think and reason, which underlies critical thinking, had basis on existence. Opening the portals of knowledge to scientific questioning, he wanted people to use arithmetic knowledge along with perspective analysis with the use of geometry. Sensory experience needed to be reliably distinct to formulate an opinion. The power to reason and judge the mechanism by which the world functioned came from the intellect. Descartes thus established by way of critical thinking that one might acquire knowledge that had scientific origins. He also showed that this knowledge of material aspects could have a mathematical basis. Chapter 3, Thinkers who fashioned critical thinking of their time. Utopia, a new order. Establishments and social systems required systematic disciplining. Sir Thomas More was one of the people behind the Renaissance and post-Renaissance forces that opened new roads to scientific thought. This reflected in the social life of those times by way of an overhaul in the way people thought, and this, in turn, led to a democratic process. Every facet of the world was a matter for discussion and criticism. Rise of Machiavellianism. In Italy, we see the rise of another superstar and the father of modern political science, Niccolò Machiavelli. He was a senior official with military and diplomatic responsibilities. More than that, he was a writer. Machiavellianism is a negative term used to describe despotic rulers and corrupt political leaders. Niccolò, for his part, seemed happy with such leaders. Niccolò endorsed political deceit and evil manipulations, including